The house looked smaller than Angela remembered, hunched against the November sky like something wounded. She sat in her rental car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went white, watching the windows for movement. The oak tree in the front yard had grown taller, its bare branches scraping against the second-floor gutters with each gust of wind. The sound. Breathe, she told herself. Count to 4, hold for 4, release for 4. The breathing exercises from rehab felt inadequate here, in the shadow of her childhood home. 68 days sober, and she felt like she was drowning anyway. When she finally stepped out of the car, the cold hit her like a slap. Pennsylvania in November, she'd forgotten how the wind could cut through you, how the sky could press down like a gray wool blanket. Her mother's marigolds were dead in their planters, brown stems poking through a thin layer of frost. Lauren would have already pulled them up by now, Angela thought before she could stop herself. Lauren never let anything die in the garden if she could help it. The front door opened before she reached it. "Angie!" Her mother's voice was too bright, too sharp. Carol Mercer stood in the doorway wearing her good sweater, the blue one with tiny pearls sewn around the neckline. Her smile was perfect and terrible. "You look wonderful, honey. Doesn't she look wonderful, Paul?" Angela's father appeared behind her mother like a shadow, his face carefully neutral. Paul Mercer had aged a decade in the 8 months since the funeral. His hair had gone completely gray, and his shoulders curved inward as if he were trying to make himself smaller. "Hello, sweetheart," he said quietly. The hug her mother pulled her into smelled like white linen perfume and something else, something medicinal and sharp. Xanax, maybe, or gin. Angela had become an expert at identifying both. Come in," Carol chirped, pulling Angela across the threshold. "The house is freezing. I swear this old furnace gets worse every year." "Lauren always said we should replace it, didn't she, Paul?" She was always practical about things like that. The words hung in the air like smoke. Angela felt her father tense beside her. "Carol," he said softly. "What?" "I'm just saying she was sensible. There's nothing wrong with remembering that she was sensible." Carol's voice had developed a brittle edge. "Anyway, come see what I've done with the living room. I moved the couch back where it used to be, where it was when you girls were small." Angela followed her mother into the living room, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. Everything was exactly the same, down to the Afghan draped over the back of the couch and the stack of Better Homes and Gardens magazines on the coffee table. The only thing different was the silence, a thick pressing quiet that made her ears ring. "I put fresh sheets on your bed," Carol continued, bustling around the room, straightening things that didn't need straightening, "and I stocked the bathroom with those fancy shampoos you like, the expensive ones from the salon." Angela hadn't used salon shampoo in months. She bought whatever was on sale at the drugstore now, when she bothered to buy anything at all. But she nodded and smiled and let her mother fuss over her because it was easier than explaining. She started to ask where Lauren was, the question automatic after years of coming home to find her sister curled up on the couch with a book. The words died in her throat. Carol froze, a throw pillow clutched against her chest. "The guest room is all ready too," she said quickly, "in case you wanted to, well, you know, options. It's good to have options. The guest room, not Lauren's room. Never Lauren's room." "I'll stay in my old room," Angela said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, rusty from disuse. "Of course you will." Carol's smile snapped back into place. "Of course, your room, with the yellow walls. I kept it exactly the way you left it." But as they walked toward the stairs, Angela caught a glimpse of the dining room through the archway. The table was set for 4. 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, 4 glasses arranged in perfect symmetry. At the far end, facing the kitchen, Lauren's chair was pulled out slightly from the table, just enough for someone to slip into. Angela stopped walking. "Mom?" Carol was already halfway up the stairs, her hand trailing along the banister. "The table. Oh, that. I wanted everything ready for tomorrow. Thanksgiving, you know. I thought we'd eat early this year. Around 2 o'clock. Lauren always liked eating early on holidays, said it gave us more time to digest before dessert. Lauren's not coming to dinner." The words formed in Angela's mind, clear and simple, but she couldn't make herself say them out loud. Her father appeared in the hallway below, looking up at them with hollow eyes. "Carol," he said again, softer this time. "Maybe we should—" "Should what?" Carol's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Should what, Paul? Should pretend this isn't still our family? Should act like we don't know how to set a proper table? That's not what I meant." "Then, what did you mean?" The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Angela pressed herself against the wall, wishing she could disappear into the wallpaper. This felt familiar, standing on the stairs while her parents fought in careful, quiet voices below. Except Lauren wasn't there to grab her hand and pull her up to their rooms, away from the tension that filled the house like poisonous gas. "I meant," Paul said finally, "that maybe we could talk about it. As a family. There's nothing to talk about." Carol's voice had gone flat, emotionless. "Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. We're having dinner, as a family, all of us." She turned and continued up the stairs, her heels clicking against the wood. Angela followed, feeling like she was being pulled by an invisible string. Her childhood bedroom was exactly as she'd left it. Twin bed with the pink comforter, desk by the window, walls covered with ribbons from high school track meets. But the air felt stale, undisturbed, like a museum display of someone else's life. "I'll let you get settled," Carol said from the doorway. "Dinner's at 6, just family tonight. Tomorrow we'll do the big meal." After her mother left, Angela sat on the bed and stared out the window at the backyard. The swing set she and Lauren had shared was gone, but the garage stood exactly where it always had. The door was closed, but she could see the edge of a car bumper through the window. Lauren's car, still there. Angela closed her eyes and tried to remember what Dr. Patterson had taught her about grounding techniques. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear. She could hear the house settling around her, old wood creaking in the cold. She could hear her mother moving around downstairs, the soft thud of cabinet doors closing. And underneath it all, so faint she might have been imagining it, she could hear music. Classical music, Chopin maybe, the kind of music Lauren used to play when she studied. Angela opened her eyes and looked around the room. There was no radio, no CD player, nothing that could be making that sound. But it was there, drifting through the walls like smoke, so soft she had to hold her breath to hear it. She got up and pressed her ear to the wall that separated her room from Lauren's. The music was clearer there, definitely Chopin, the Raindrop Prelude, Lauren's favorite. Angela pulled her hand back from the wall as if it had burned her. The music stopped. "Angie?" her mother called from downstairs. "Could you come help me with something?" She found Carol in the kitchen, standing in front of the open refrigerator with a confused expression on her face. "I could have sworn I bought cranberry sauce," Carol said, "the jellied kind, Lauren's favorite. But I can't find it anywhere." Angela looked past her mother into the refrigerator. It was packed with food, turkey, stuffing, green beans, 3 different kinds of pie, enough to feed a small army. "Maybe you forgot," Angela suggested gently. "I don't forget." Carol's voice was sharp again. "I never forget. I made a list. I always make a list." She grabbed a crumpled piece of paper from the counter and held it up. Angela could see her mother's neat handwriting, items crossed off in blue ink. At the bottom of the list, circled twice, were the words cranberry sauce jellied, Lauren's favorite. "See?" Carol said triumphantly. "I wrote it down. I bought it. I know I bought it. Maybe Dad moved it? Your father doesn't move things. He doesn't even know where we keep the can opener." Carol slammed the refrigerator door. Someone took it. The words hung in the air between them. Angela felt something cold crawl up her spine. "Who would take cranberry sauce, Mom?" Carol stared at her for a long moment, her eyes bright and strange. "Someone who knew it was her favorite," she said quietly. Before Angela could respond, her father appeared in the kitchen doorway. "What's wrong?" he asked, looking between them. "The cranberry sauce is missing," Carol said. "Someone took Lauren's cranberry sauce." Paul closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "Carol, please." "Please what? Please stop caring about what my daughter likes? Please stop trying to make sure she has everything she needs? She's not—" Paul started, then stopped himself. The words he didn't say seemed to echo in the room anyway. "She's not here. She's not coming. She's never coming." "I'll go to the store," Angela said quickly. I'll get more cranberry sauce. No problem. Carol smiled at her, the expression so grateful it made Angela's chest ache. You're a good girl, Angie. You always take care of things. As Angela grabbed her keys from the counter, she caught her father's eye. He looked like a man drowning in shallow water. I'll come with you, he said. They drove to the grocery store in silence, past the familiar landmarks of Angela's childhood, the elementary school with its chain-link playground, the MC, Donald's, where she'd gotten her first job, the intersection where Tommy Morrison had wrapped his car around a telephone pole junior year of high school. Everything looked smaller, shabbier than she remembered. The grocery store was crowded with last-minute holiday shoppers. Angela found herself overwhelmed by the noise, the bright fluorescent lights, the collision of voices and cartwheels and checkout beepers. She hadn't been in a crowd this big since leaving rehab. You okay? Her father asked, steering her toward a quieter corner near the pharmacy. Fine, she lied. Just tired. Paul studied her face with the careful attention he'd once reserved for crossword puzzles. You look better, he said finally. Healthier. 68 days. That's good, sweetheart. That's really good. They found the cranberry sauce in aisle 7, an entire shelf of identical cans with bright red labels. Angela grabbed 2 cans, one for backup, and they headed for the checkout. She's not doing well, Paul said as they waited in line. Angela didn't need to ask who he meant. How long has she been like this? Since the funeral, maybe before. He lowered his voice. She talks to her sometimes, to Lauren, when she thinks I can't hear. Angela felt something twist in her stomach. What does she say? Normal things, mother things. Did you sleep well? What do you want for breakfast? Don't forget your jacket, it's cold outside. His voice cracked slightly. Yesterday I found her making 2 cups of coffee. She said Lauren always liked hers with extra cream. The line moved forward, and Angela found herself staring at a magazine rack filled with celebrity gossip and holiday recipes. Everything normal, everything ordinary. The kind of magazines Lauren used to flip through while waiting in line, making fun of the fashion choices and reading the horoscopes out loud. Dad, Angela said quietly, maybe we should talk to someone, a doctor or... I tried. He sounded defeated. She won't hear it. Says there's nothing wrong with remembering. Says I'm the one who's sick for trying to forget. They paid for the cranberry sauce and walked back to the car. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of old blood. Angela shivered and pulled her jacket tighter. She still has her things, Paul said as they got in the car. Lauren's things. Her room is exactly the same. Her clothes are still in the closet. Sometimes I catch your mother in there, just sitting. And you haven't said anything? What am I supposed to say? Stop grieving? Move on? She lost her baby, Angie. We both did. But there was something else in his voice, something he wasn't saying. Angela had learned to listen for the spaces between words during her time in rehab, the things people couldn't bring themselves to admit. What is it? She asked. Paul stared straight ahead at the road. Sometimes, he said slowly, I think I hear her too. Dinner was a careful choreography of avoidance. Carol had made pot roast with carrots and potatoes, green beans with almonds, and fresh dinner rolls that filled the kitchen with the smell of yeast and butter. She'd opened a bottle of wine, red to go with the meat, and poured 3 glasses before remembering that Angela didn't drink anymore. Oh! Carol's hand froze over the 4th glass. I'm sorry, honey. I forgot. I'll get you some juice. Or water. Do you want water? Water's fine, Angela said, though her throat felt parched watching the wine slosh in the other glasses. 68 days, and the want still hit her like a physical blow sometimes. They sat at the kitchen table, the smaller one by the window. The dining room table remained set for 4, waiting for tomorrow's meal. Carol had positioned herself so she could see into the dining room, her eyes flicking toward Lauren's empty chair every few minutes. So, Carol said, sawing at her pot roast with unnecessary force, tell us about the program, the place in Colorado. Was it nice? It was fine. Fine? Carol's voice went sharp. $30,000 and it was fine? Carol Paul's voice carried a warning. I'm just asking. I want to know what we paid for, what kind of help she got. Angela set down her fork. She'd practiced this conversation in her head a dozen times during the drive from Denver, but now the words felt clumsy and inadequate. I learned coping strategies, she said. How to identify triggers, how to ask for help. Triggers. Carol repeated the word like it tasted bad. What kind of triggers? Guilt, shame, the sound of breaking glass, the smell of gasoline. The memory of Lauren's voice saying, "Angie, slow down." Stress, Angela said instead. Difficult emotions. Well, I should think you'd have learned to handle those by now. You're 32 years old. Carol, please. Please what? Please don't expect my daughter to act like an adult. Please don't wonder why she can't cope with normal life without running away to some fancy spa in the mountains. Angela felt heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't a spa, Mom. It was a treatment center. For addicts. The word hung between them like a curse. Carol had never said it before, not out loud, not directly. She'd used euphemisms, your problem, your situation, that phase you went through, but never the word itself. Yes, Angela said quietly. For addicts. Paul reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We're glad you got help, he said. We're proud of you for getting clean. Carol made a small sound, half laugh and half sob. Clean, she said, as if she was just dirty, as if it was something soap could fix. The silence that followed was so complete, Angela could hear the refrigerator humming in the corner, the tick of the clock over the sink. Outside, a car door slammed and she jumped. The Petersons, Carol said, following her gaze toward the window. They're having their whole family over tomorrow. 3 generations crammed into that little house. It'll be chaos. Angela remembered the Peterson family from her childhood. Loud, cheerful people who threw elaborate holiday parties and invited half the neighborhood. She and Lauren used to sneak into their backyard to watch through the kitchen window, fascinated by the warm chaos inside. That sounds nice, Angela said. Nice. Carol's voice was bitter. Must be nice to have a whole family show up for the holidays. Carol. This time Paul's voice was sharp. Stop it. Stop what? Stop stating facts? Stop noticing that we used to be 4 people and now we're 3? Angela felt something crack inside her chest. I know Lauren's not here, she said. I know she's not coming to dinner. I know she's... Don't. Carol's voice cut through her words like a blade. Don't say it. Say what? You know what? Angela stared at her mother's face, seeing the careful architecture of denial that held her together. The makeup applied with shaking hands, the smile practiced in mirrors, the bright chatter that filled every silence before it could become dangerous. Mom, Angela said gently, she's dead. Carol's wine glass shattered against the kitchen floor. The sound seemed to echo forever, red wine spreading across the white linoleum like blood. Carol stared down at the mess, her face completely blank. I'll get the paper towels, Paul said, starting to rise. No. Carol's voice was strange, distant. Leave it. Carol, it's making a mess. I said leave it. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not feeling well, she announced to no one in particular. I think I'll lie down. She walked out of the kitchen without looking back, her footsteps disappearing up the stairs. A moment later, they heard her bedroom door close. Paul and Angela sat in the wreckage of dinner, staring at the broken glass and spilled wine. The pot roast was getting cold, congealing in its own gravy. She hasn't said it, Paul said quietly. Not once, not even at the funeral. She just won't. Angela knelt down and started picking up the larger pieces of glass, her hands shaking slightly. The wine was sticky between her fingers and the smell made her stomach turn. Maybe that's how she copes, she said. By pretending it didn't happen? By pretending it doesn't matter. Paul got the paper towels and started mopping up the wine. They worked in silence, cleaning up the mess while the house settled around them. When they were finished, the kitchen looked normal again, as if nothing had broken at all. I keep thinking she'll snap out of it, Paul said, throwing the wine-soaked towels into the garbage, like she's just stuck and something will unstick her. What if she doesn't want to get unstuck? The question hung between them. Paul looked older than his 57 years, worn down by months of careful navigation around his wife's grief. Your mother thinks it's her fault, he said suddenly. Angela felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean? The night it happened, Lauren was supposed to stay home. Your mother asked her to help with preparations for the Petersons' anniversary party, some church thing. But Lauren said she needed to pick you up, that you'd called and... He trailed off. And what? And you needed help. I called her. The memory came rushing back, fumbling with her phone in the bar bathroom, fingers too clumsy to dial properly. She'd been at Murphy's Tavern, 3 sheets to the wind and getting worse, when she'd remembered that she'd promised to help Lauren move some furniture. She'd called, slurring apologies and explanations, and Lauren had sighed but said she'd come get her. She didn't have to come, Angela said, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. No, Paul agreed. She didn't have to. But she did, because that's who Lauren was. They finished cleaning in silence. When Angela went to throw away the last of the broken glass, she found herself staring into the garbage can at the wine-stained paper towels. They looked like evidence of something terrible. "Dad," she said, "what really happened that night?" Paul went very still. "You know what happened. I know what the police report said. I know what I told them, but I can't remember everything." That was the truth, or part of it. The last clear memory she had was of Lauren helping her into the passenger seat of the Honda, buckling her seatbelt like she was a child. After that, everything went soft and strange, filtered through the haze of too much whiskey and not enough food. "Angela, I was drunk, really drunk. And Lauren was driving, and we hit a patch of ice, and the car went off the road. That's what I told the police. That's what everyone believes." Paul was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "That's what happened," he said carefully. "Is it?" The question hung in the air between them. Angela felt something shifting inside her chest, a door creaking open that she'd been keeping carefully locked. "I need to know," she said. "I need to remember. Some things are better forgotten." "Are they?" Paul reached out and touched her shoulder, and she could feel him shaking. "Your mother couldn't survive the truth," he said quietly, "and neither could you." Before Angela could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Carol appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing a bathrobe and looking like someone who'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "I'm sorry," she said, "about dinner, about the wine. Some days are harder than others." "It's okay, Mom." "No, it's not okay. You came home and I should be happy. I should be grateful that I still have one daughter." Her voice cracked on the word daughter. "I am grateful. Just what?" Carol looked around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. "I keep expecting her to walk through that door," she said. "I know it doesn't make sense. I know she's..." She swallowed hard. "I know she's not coming home. But I keep listening for her car in the driveway. Keep waiting for her to call and say she's running late." Angela felt tears prick her eyes. "Mom, I set her place at the table because I can't stand to see it empty. I buy her favorite foods because forgetting what she liked feels like losing her all over again. I know it's crazy. I know it's not healthy, but it's the only way I can get through the day." She sat down heavily in her chair, looking exhausted. "The grief counselor says I need to accept the reality of the loss," Carol continued, "as if I don't know she's gone, as if I haven't lived with that knowledge every minute of every day for 8 months. I accept it. I just don't know how to live with it." Paul reached across the table and took his wife's hand. "We'll figure it out," he said, "together." Carol nodded, but Angela could see the doubt in her eyes. They were a family of 3 now, but they were still learning how to fit together in their new configuration, still learning how to exist in the space Lauren had left behind. Later, after her parents had gone to bed, Angela found herself standing in the hallway outside Lauren's room. The door was closed, but she could see light seeping out underneath. She pressed her ear to the wood and listened. Silence, but not empty silence, the kind of quiet that felt full, expectant. She tried the handle, locked, but as she turned away, she heard something that made her blood go cold, the soft sound of someone moving around inside the room, footsteps across the carpet, the creak of bed springs, and then, so faint she might have imagined it, the sound of someone humming. Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. Angela pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes, counting her breaths. When she opened them again, the light under the door was gone. Angela woke before dawn to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful steps, like someone trying not to be heard. She lay still in her narrow childhood bed, listening to the house breathe around her. The footsteps paused outside her door, and she held her breath, waiting. But no one knocked. After a moment, the footsteps continued down the hall, fading into silence. She got up and cracked her door open. The hallway was empty, filled with the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the window at the far end. But there was something different about the air, a sweet floral scent that hadn't been there the night before. White tea perfume, Lauren's signature scent since high school. Angela pulled on her robe and padded downstairs to the kitchen. Her mother was already there, standing at the counter in her nightgown, staring at the coffee maker as if she'd never seen one before. "Morning," Angela said softly. Carol jumped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Oh, you startled me. I didn't hear you come down. Couldn't sleep." "Me neither. I thought I'd get an early start on the prep work." Carol gestured vaguely toward the counter, which was empty except for the coffee maker and a single mug, though I seemed to have forgotten what I was preparing for. Angela looked at her mother more closely. Carol's eyes were red-rimmed and unfocused, and her hands shook as she reached for the coffee. She looked like someone who hadn't slept at all. "Why don't you sit down?" Angela said. "I'll make breakfast." "Oh, you don't need to." "I want to." Carol sank into a chair at the kitchen table, looking grateful. Angela busied herself with the familiar routine of morning, coffee brewing, egg scrambling, toast browning in the toaster. The normalcy of it was soothing, almost meditative. "I used to love cooking for you girls," Carol said suddenly. "Remember Sunday mornings? I'd make pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, and you'd fight over who got the biggest ears." Angela smiled, stirring the eggs. Lauren always won. She had sharper elbows. She was competitive about everything. Remember her science fair projects? She'd work on them for months, staying up late to get every detail perfect. The one about acid rain, she was so serious about it. 8th grade. She won first place and cried because she thought the other kids' projects deserved recognition too. Carol's voice was soft with memory. She had such a tender heart. Angela served the eggs and sat down across from her mother. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the morning light gradually filling the kitchen with gold. She was excited about Thanksgiving, Carol said suddenly. This year's, I mean. She'd been planning the menu for weeks, said she wanted to try a new stuffing recipe she'd found online, something with cranberries and pecans. Angela's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Mom, I know." Carol's voice was sharp. "I know she's not here. I know she's not cooking anything. But that doesn't mean I can't remember what she wanted." They finished eating in silence. Angela did the dishes while Carol sat at the table, staring out the window at the backyard. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of day that made you want to take long walks and drink hot cider. "I should check on the turkey," Carol said eventually. "What turkey?" Carol blinked, looking confused. For tomorrow, Thanksgiving, I bought a turkey." Angela opened the refrigerator and looked inside. No turkey, just the same collection of food from the day before. Stuffing mix, green beans, pie crusts. "Maybe it's in the garage refrigerator," Angela suggested. "Maybe." But Carol looked uncertain. They walked out to the garage together, their breath visible in the cold air. The old refrigerator hummed in the corner, next to boxes of Christmas decorations and lawn furniture. Carol opened it hopefully, but it contained only a few cans of soda and a jar of pickles. "I could have sworn I bought one," Carol muttered. 20-pound bird, fresh, not frozen. I specifically asked the butcher for fresh." Angela's attention was caught by something else. Lauren's car sat in its usual spot, covered by a thin layer of dust. A blue Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper from where she'd backed into a mailbox senior year of high school. "Why is it still here?" Angela asked. Carol followed her gaze. "Your father can't bring himself to get rid of it. Says it still runs fine, that someone could use it, but he won't sell it." She walked over to the car and placed her hand on the hood. "Sometimes I sit in it, just to feel close to her." Angela approached the car slowly, as if it might bolt. The windows were slightly fogged with condensation, and there were dead leaves scattered across the windshield. but otherwise it looked exactly as Lauren had left it. Coffee cup still in the holder, sunglasses hanging from the rearview mirror, a CD case on the passenger seat. Chopin, the complete nocturnes. The battery's dead, of course, Carol continued, but your father charges it sometimes, says it's not good for a car to just sit. Angela peered through the driver's side window. The interior was pristine, preserved like a shrine. Lauren had always been meticulous about her car, vacuuming it weekly and keeping the glove compartment organized. Did she have anything with her that night? Angela asked. In the car, I mean. Carol's hand stilled on the hood. What do you mean? Books, clothes, anything personal. The police report didn't mention personal effects. There wasn't much left to recover. Carol's voice went flat. The car it was completely destroyed. This is her other car, her good car. She was driving the old Camry that night, the one she used for work. The Camry. Angela had forgotten about Lauren's work car, the ancient sedan she'd driven to her job at the dental office. A practical, ugly thing that Lauren had bought for $3,000 and driven into the ground. What happened to it? The Camry? Junkyard, I assume. Insurance company took care of it. Carol turned away from the Honda. I should get started on the cooking. Even without a turkey, there's plenty to prepare. But as they walked back toward the house, Angela caught something from the corner of her eye. A flicker of movement from inside the Honda, as if someone had shifted in the driver's seat. She turned back, but the car was still and silent. Back in the kitchen, Carol threw herself into cooking with manic energy. She made 3 kinds of stuffing, 2 casseroles, and enough mashed potatoes to feed a small army. Angela helped where she could, but mostly she watched her mother work, noting the way Carol's hands shook when she thought no one was looking. Mom, Angela said finally, are you taking anything? For the anxiety? Carol's hands stilled over the potato masher. What anxiety? The shaking, the sleeplessness. It's okay if you are. There's no shame in needing help. I'm fine. You're not fine. Neither am I, but... I said I'm fine. Carol's voice was sharp enough to cut. I don't need pills to deal with my problems. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Angela felt heat rise in her cheeks. I wasn't suggesting you did. I just thought... You thought what? That I'm falling apart like you did? That I can't handle my own grief without chemical assistance? Mom, that's not... Because I can handle it. I've been handling it for 8 months while you were in Colorado learning how to cope with difficult emotions. The bitterness in Carol's voice was so thick Angela could taste it. I was getting help, Angela said quietly. You were running away. The words hit like a physical blow. Angela gripped the edge of the counter, fighting the urge to run, upstairs, outside, anywhere but here. I needed help, she said. We all needed help, but some of us stayed and dealt with it. Dealt with it? Angela's voice rose. You call this dealing with it? Setting places for dead people? Buying food for someone who's never going to eat it? Carol went very still. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't point out that you're living in a fantasy? Don't mention that Lauren is never coming home? Stop it. She's dead, Mom. She's been dead for 8 months. And no amount of place settings or favorite foods is going to change that. Carol's face crumpled, and for a moment Angela thought her mother might cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Get out of my kitchen, she said. Mom, get out. Now. Angela left her mother standing among the ruins of Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by enough food for a family twice their size. She grabbed her jacket and walked outside, needing air and space and silence. The November afternoon was cold and bright, the kind of day that made everything look sharp and clean. Angela walked down the street she'd grown up on, past houses where she trick-or-treated and sold Girl Scout cookies and shoveled driveways for spending money. The Peterson house was already bustling with activity. She could see cars filling the driveway and spilling onto the street, could hear laughter and voices through the windows. A little girl in a red dress ran across the front yard, chasing a golden retriever that barked with joy. Angela found herself walking toward the park at the end of the street, the same park where she and Lauren had spent countless summer afternoons. The swings were empty now, creaking in the wind. She sat on one and pushed herself back and forth gently, the chains squealing with each movement. You were running away. Her mother's words echoed in her head. Maybe Carol was right. Maybe rehab had been less about getting sober and more about escaping the weight of what had happened. It was easier to focus on meetings and therapy sessions and step work than to face the reality of coming home to a family that had been broken in half. But sitting here now, in the place where she and Lauren had shared so many ordinary moments, Angela felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the actual physical absence of her sister. Not the abstract knowledge that she was gone, but the specific emptiness where Lauren should have been. Lauren would have been 30 in January. She'd been planning a party, had mentioned it the last time they talked on the phone. Nothing fancy, just friends and family at their parents' house. She'd wanted Angela to help her plan it, had been excited about the idea of the two of them working together on something. "We never do stuff together anymore," Lauren had said. "You're always so busy with work and I'm busy with work and we don't make time." Angela had promised they'd plan something special, had said they'd talk about it after the holidays. Now January was coming, and there would be no birthday party, no cake, no presents, no gathering of friends to celebrate Lauren turning 30, just another date on the calendar that would hurt to look at. Angela stayed at the park until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Lauren would have loved. When she finally walked home, the lights were on in every window of her parents' house, making it look warm and inviting from the outside. Inside was a different story. Her father was in the living room, sitting in his chair with a book open in his lap, but Angela could tell he wasn't reading. Her mother was nowhere to be seen, though the kitchen showed evidence of frantic cooking, every surface covered with casserole dishes and pie plates and serving bowls. "Where's Mom?" Angela asked. "Upstairs. Resting." Paul's voice was carefully neutral, but Angela could hear the exhaustion underneath. "How long has she been like this?" "Since the funeral, maybe before." He closed his book and looked at her directly. "She hasn't been sleeping, hasn't been eating much. The doctor gave her something to help, but she won't take it." "Why not?" "Says she needs to feel everything. Says Lauren would want her to feel everything." Angela sank into the couch across from her father's chair. The house felt different in the evening light, older, more fragile, like a stage set that might collapse if you looked at it too closely. "Dad," she said, "I think I need to remember what really happened that night." Paul went very still. "Angela, I know what I told the police. I know what's in the report. But there are pieces missing, things that don't make sense." "What kind of things?" Angela closed her eyes and tried to reach back into that night, past the fog of alcohol and shock and grief. She remembered being at Murphy's Tavern, remembered calling Lauren for help. She remembered Lauren arriving, remembered getting into the car. But after that, everything went soft and strange. "I remember being in the passenger seat," she said. "Lauren was driving, and it was raining. We were talking about something, but I can't remember what. And then what? I don't know. That's the problem. I remember waking up in the hospital 3 days later, and you telling me that Lauren was dead, but I don't remember the accident itself." Paul was quiet for a long time. "The doctor said that was normal," he said finally. "Traumatic brain injury. Sometimes memories don't form properly when you're in shock. But what if it wasn't shock? What if I'm not remembering because I don't want to remember?" "What do you mean?" Angela opened her eyes and looked at her father. He was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "What if I'm not telling myself the truth about what happened?" Before Paul could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Carol appeared in the living room doorway, still wearing the same clothes from that morning but looking somehow smaller, more fragile. "Dinner's ready," she announced. "I made Lauren's favorite, chicken and dumplings." Angela and Paul exchanged glances. "Mom," Angela said gently, "you made Thanksgiving dinner, turkey and stuffing and all the fixings." Carol blinked, looking confused. "Did I? I thought. I could have sworn I made chicken and dumplings." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Angela and Paul followed, finding the kitchen table set for 3, steaming bowls of chicken and dumplings at each place. The Thanksgiving food was still scattered across the counters, untouched. "When did you make this?" Paul asked. "This afternoon, while you were at the park." Carol looked at Angela. "You were gone for hours. I was worried." "But that was impossible." Angela had been gone for maybe 2 hours, and chicken and dumplings took at least that long to cook. Carol would have had to start them before Angela left, which meant she'd been cooking 2 different meals at the same time. They sat down to eat in silence. The chicken and dumplings were perfect, exactly the way Lauren had always liked them, with plenty of vegetables and thick, fluffy dumplings. But Angela could barely taste the food. She was too busy watching her mother, noting the way Carol kept glancing toward the empty 4th chair, the way her lips moved as if she were having a conversation with someone only she could see. This was always her favorite, Carol said suddenly. When she was sick, when she was sad, when she had a bad day at school, chicken and dumplings could fix anything. It's delicious, Mom. She helped me make it the first time. She was maybe 8 years old, standing on a chair so she could reach the stove. She was so proud when they turned out right. Carol smiled at the memory. She said we made the best dumplings in Pennsylvania. Angela felt her throat tighten. She was right. She was always right about food, had such good instincts about flavors, about what went together. She could have been a chef if she'd wanted to. She loved cooking. Still does, Carol said, and then stopped abruptly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Paul set down his spoon and looked at his wife with careful attention. Carol, he said softly. What? What did I say? You said, still does. I meant did, past tense. She did love cooking. But Carol's voice was uncertain, as if she wasn't sure which tense was correct. After dinner, Angela helped her mother clean up while Paul retreated to his study. They worked in silence, washing dishes and putting away the mountain of uneaten Thanksgiving food. Carol moved like someone in a trance, going through the motions without really seeing what she was doing. Mom, Angela said as they finished, are you sure you're okay? You seem distant. Carol dried her hands on a dish towel and turned to face her daughter. Can I tell you something? She said quietly. Of course. Sometimes I think she's still here. Angela felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean? I mean, I think she's still here. In the house. I hear her walking around at night. I smell her perfume in the hallway. Sometimes I find things moved around in her room. Mom. I know how it sounds. I know you think I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. But I can feel her here, Angie. As real as you're standing there now. Carol's eyes were bright with tears, but also with something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Yesterday morning I found her coffee mug in the sink, clean like she'd just washed it. And last week I could have sworn I heard her practicing piano in the living room. Angela felt the floor seem to shift beneath her feet. The piano had been sold 3 years ago to make room for Carol's sewing machine. Mom, there is no piano. I know there's no piano, but I heard music. Chopin, her favorite piece, the Raindrop Prelude, the same music Angela had heard the night before. Maybe it was the radio. It wasn't the radio. Carol's voice was firm. It was her, playing for me. They stared at each other across the kitchen, mother and daughter separated by grief and guilt and the terrible weight of the truth. Angela wanted to argue, to point out the impossibility of what Carol was suggesting, but she couldn't shake the memory of footsteps in the hallway, of light under Lauren's bedroom door, of the sweet smell of white tea perfume. What if, Carol said quietly, what if she's trying to tell us something? Before Angela could respond, they heard a sound that made them both freeze. The garage door was opening. They stood perfectly still, listening to the mechanical whir of the door lifting, the sound echoing through the house. After a moment, it stopped. Paul? Carol called out. No answer. They walked to the kitchen window that looked out on the driveway. Paul's car was still there, parked in its usual spot, and the garage door was indeed open, the dark interior visible from where they stood. Maybe the wind, Angela started. But even as she said it, they heard another sound, a car engine turning over, once, twice, then catching. The sound was coming from inside the garage. Angela felt her heart start to race. She grabbed her mother's arm and pulled her toward the front of the house, away from the garage. Dad, she called out. Dad, are you in there? Paul appeared at the top of the stairs, looking confused. What's wrong? The garage door opened. There's a car running. Paul's face went pale. He came down the stairs quickly, heading for the door that led to the garage. "Don't," Angela said, grabbing his arm. "Just don't." But Paul shook her off and opened the door. The sound of the running engine was louder now, filling the house with its steady rumble. He flipped on the garage light. Lauren's Honda was running, headlights on, exhaust visible in the cold air. The driver's side door was open, and there was someone sitting behind the wheel. Angela caught just a glimpse, dark hair, a familiar profile, hands gripping the steering wheel, before Paul slammed the door shut and leaned against it, breathing hard. "What did you see?" Carol whispered. Paul looked at his wife and daughter, his face gray with shock. "Nothing," he said. "I saw nothing." But Angela had seen. For just a moment, just long enough to be sure, she had seen her sister sitting in the driver's seat of her car, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. The engine continued to run for another minute. Then, abruptly, it stopped. In the silence that followed, they could hear the garage door closing again, the mechanical whir growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. They stood in the kitchen for a long time, not speaking, not moving. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the November sky, and somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Finally, Carol broke the silence. "She's trying to tell us something," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. And Angela, despite every rational thought in her head, found herself nodding. Angela didn't sleep that night. She lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house breathe around her. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows, every distant sound made her pulse quicken. Around 2 a.m., she heard her parents talking in hushed voices down the hall. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the rhythm of their conversation. Paul's voice low and steady, Carol's rising and falling with emotion. After a while, the talking stopped, but Angela could still hear someone moving around. At 2:17 a.m., exactly as she'd somehow known it would, the garage door began to open again. Angela got up and crept to her window. From here she could see the side of the garage, the yellow light spilling out onto the driveway. She pressed her face against the glass and watched, her breath fogging the cold window. A figure emerged from the garage, tall, slender, wearing a dark coat. The figure walked to the end of the driveway and stood there for a moment, looking up and down the empty street. Then it turned and walked back toward the house, disappearing from view. A few minutes later, the garage door closed. Angela climbed back into bed, but she didn't even try to sleep. She lay there until dawn, thinking about what she'd seen and what it meant. By the time the sun came up, she'd made a decision. She found her father in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. "Dad," she said, "I need to see the police report, the real one." Paul's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Angela, I need to know what really happened that night. You know what happened." "No, I don't. I know what I told them, but I don't know if it's true." Paul poured coffee into 2 mugs, his movements careful and deliberate. He handed one to Angela and sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Why now?" he asked. "Why does it matter now? Because of what we saw last night? Because of what Mom's been experiencing? Because I can't shake the feeling that we're all lying to ourselves about something." Paul was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. "The report won't tell you anything you don't already know," he said finally. "Then let me see it anyway. Angela, please." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I need to know. For my own peace of mind, if nothing else." Paul studied her face, and she could see him weighing something in his mind. "All right," he said, "but not here. Your mother doesn't need to see it again." They drove to Paul's office at the insurance agency where he worked, a squat brick building in the center of town. Paul had his own key, and they let themselves in through the back door. His office was small and cluttered, the walls covered with certificates and family photos. Paul unlocked a filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. He handed it to Angela without a word. The police report was thicker than she'd expected, 20-some pages of forms and photographs and witness statements. Angela spread it out on her father's desk and began to read, Paul standing behind her like a silent guard. November 23, 2000. Single vehicle accident on Route 15, approximately 2.3 miles north of the intersection with County Road 47. Vehicle left roadway and struck tree. Driver pronounced dead at scene. Passenger transported to Mercy General Hospital with head injuries. Angela flipped through the pages, looking for details that might trigger a memory. The photographs were the worst part. Twisted metal that had once been Lauren's Camry, broken glass scattered across wet asphalt, skid marks that told the story of a car going too fast on a rainy night. She found the witness statements. A truck driver who'd been behind them reported seeing the car weaving slightly before it went off the road. The investigating officer noted strong odor of alcohol and passenger appeared intoxicated. Passenger, not driver. Angela kept reading, looking for something that felt wrong, some detail that didn't match her fragmented memories. But everything seemed to support the story she told. Lauren driving, Angela too drunk to be behind the wheel, a patch of ice or standing water that sent them off the road and into the tree line. "I don't understand," she said. "This all matches what I remember. Then why did you need to see it?" Angela stared at the report, frustration building in her chest. She'd been so sure there was something missing, some crucial detail that would explain the guilt she carried like a stone in her stomach. "Because it doesn't feel right," she said. "None of it feels right." Paul sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Guilt doesn't always make sense," he said. "You survived and she didn't. That's enough to mess with anyone's head. It's more than that." "Is it?" Angela looked at her father's face, studying the lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself. There was something he wasn't telling her, something he was working hard to keep hidden. "Dad," she said quietly, "were you at the hospital that night?" "Of course I was. We both were. I mean, when they brought me in. Were you there when the ambulance arrived?" Paul's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes." "What did the paramedics say? About the accident? About what they found?" "I don't remember exactly. It was chaotic. We were focused on whether you were going to be okay." But Angela could see the lie in his eyes, could hear it in the careful modulation of his voice. He remembered exactly what the paramedics had said. He remembered everything. "Dad, please, I need to know." Paul was quiet for such a long time that Angela thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They said you were found in the driver's seat." The words hit Angela like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the desk, the room spinning around her. "What?" "The paramedics. When they cut you out of the car, you were behind the wheel." Angela felt something crack open inside her chest, a door she'd been keeping locked for 8 months. "But I told them Lauren was driving. I told everyone." "I know what you told them. Why didn't you correct me? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Paul looked older than she'd ever seen him, worn down by the weight of the secret he'd been carrying. "Because you were so broken," he said. "Because you kept saying it was your fault, that you should have been the one to die. Because the doctor said you might not survive if you didn't find a way to live with what happened." Angela stared at the police report spread across the desk, the words blurring through her tears. She remembered now. Not the accident itself, but the moments before. Lauren in the passenger seat, begging her to slow down, the sound of rain on the windshield, the feeling of the wheel spinning out of her hands. "I was driving," she whispered. "Yes, I killed her. It was an accident, Angela. A terrible accident. I was drunk. I was driving drunk, and I killed my sister." The truth settled over her like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. She understood now why her mother couldn't say Lauren's name, why her father looked like he was carrying the world on his shoulders, why she'd felt such overwhelming guilt that she tried to drown it in alcohol. "The family agreed," Paul said quietly. "All of us. Your mother, me, even Lauren's friends who knew you'd been drinking. We agreed that the official story would be that Lauren was driving, that it would be better for everyone if that's what people believed. Better for who? For you, for your mother, for Lauren's memory." Angela laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the small office. "Better? You think this is better? Mom's having a breakdown. You're barely holding it together." and I spent 8 months in rehab trying to figure out why I felt so guilty about something that wasn't my fault. We did what we thought was best. You did what was easiest." Paul flinched as if she'd slapped him. "Do you think this has been easy?" he asked. "Watching your mother set places for a dead daughter? Listening to you blame yourself for something we told you wasn't your fault? Living with the knowledge that we're all complicit in a lie?" Angela wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because you asked, because you said you needed to know, and because—" He trailed off. "Because what?" "Because I think she knows." A chill ran down Angela's spine. "Who knows?" "Lauren. I think she knows we've been lying, and she's trying to tell us something." They sat in silence for a long time, the truth hanging between them like a live wire. Outside, Angela could hear the normal sounds of a Thursday morning, cars driving to work, children walking to school, the ordinary rhythm of a world that kept turning despite the wreckage of their family. "What do we do now?" Angela asked finally. "I don't know. Do we tell Mom?" Paul shook his head. "She can't handle it. Not now. Maybe not ever." "So we keep lying?" "We keep protecting her." Angela gathered up the pages of the police report and handed them back to her father. The photographs of the wreckage seemed to burn her fingers. "This is why she's been seeing her," Angela said. "Lauren, she's been trying to tell us the truth. That's not possible, isn't it? You saw her last night, in the car." Paul was quiet for a moment. "I saw something," he said finally, "but I don't know what it was. It was her. Angela. She's been trying to tell us, and we haven't been listening. The music, the footsteps, the car running in the garage. She knows we've been lying about what happened." Paul stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "Even if that were true," he said, "what could we do about it? How do you apologize to a dead person?" Angela didn't have an answer. She followed her father out of the office and back to the car, the weight of the truth settling over her like a shroud. She'd wanted to remember what happened that night, and now she did. But the knowledge didn't bring relief. It brought something much worse. It brought the certainty that they were all haunted, not by Lauren's ghost, but by the lie they'd built around her death. And until they found the courage to speak the truth out loud, none of them would ever be free. They drove home in silence, the truth sitting between them like a third passenger. Angela stared out the window at the familiar streets of her childhood, seeing them differently now. The intersection where she'd gotten her first speeding ticket looked darker somehow. The bridge over Willow Creek, where she and Lauren used to drop popcorn for the ducks, seemed smaller and more fragile. When they pulled into the driveway, Carol's car was gone. "Where did she go?" Angela asked. Paul looked at the empty garage with concern. "I don't know. She doesn't usually go out alone anymore." They found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Carol's careful script, "Gone to get turkey. Back soon. Don't wait lunch, Mom." "Turkey," Paul muttered. "On Thanksgiving Day. Everything will be picked over." Angela sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. The enormity of what she'd learned was starting to sink in. For 8 months, she'd been carrying guilt over an accident that everyone told her wasn't her fault. But it was her fault. She'd been behind the wheel, drunk and reckless, when she'd killed her own sister. "How do you live with it?" she asked. Paul sat down across from her. "The knowing, I mean. How do you get up every morning and go through the motions when you know what really happened?" "You focus on what matters," Paul said quietly. "Keeping your mother sane, keeping you alive, making sure the family doesn't fall apart completely. Is that what we're doing? Staying together?" Paul looked around the kitchen, at the empty chairs, the silence where Lauren's laughter used to be, the careful way they all avoided mentioning her name. "I thought we were," he said. "But maybe we're just coexisting, like strangers sharing the same house." Angela nodded. That was exactly what it felt like. They were 3 people who happened to live together, but they weren't really a family anymore. They were just survivors of the same disaster, too damaged to connect but too afraid to let go. Carol returned 2 hours later with a small turkey and a manic gleam in her eyes. "They had one left," she announced, bustling into the kitchen with her prize. The butcher said it was the last fresh one. 18 pounds. Perfect for a family of 4. Angela and Paul exchanged glances. 4? Paul said carefully. Well, us 3 and company. You never know who might stop by on Thanksgiving. She began pulling ingredients out of bags with frantic energy. Sage, onions, celery, butter. All the makings of a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. Mom, Angela said, it's almost 2 o'clock. Even if we start cooking now, we won't eat until evening. That's fine. Lauren always said the best holiday meals were the ones that took all day to prepare. Said it gave everyone time to work up an appetite. There it was again, Lauren's name, spoken as if she might walk through the door at any moment. Angela felt something twist in her stomach. I'll help, she said. They spent the afternoon in the kitchen together, 3 people moving around each other with careful precision. Carol stuffed the turkey and put it in the oven. Paul peeled potatoes and carrots. Angela made cranberry sauce from the cans they'd bought the night before, following the recipe Lauren had always used. As they worked, Carol kept up a steady stream of chatter about previous Thanksgivings, about Lauren's preferences and opinions and memories. It was as if saying Lauren's name enough times might somehow conjure her into existence. She always insisted on making the gravy from scratch, Carol said, whisking flour into the turkey drippings. Said the instant stuff tasted like paste. Remember that Thanksgiving when she was 16? She spent 3 hours perfecting the gravy recipe, and then the dog got into the kitchen and knocked over the whole pan? Buster, Paul said with a small smile. That old retriever, he ate everything. Lauren cried for an hour, not because of the mess, but because she thought dinner was ruined. You told her it wasn't about the gravy, it was about being together. Angela remembered that Thanksgiving. She'd been home from college, full of herself and her newfound independence. She'd made fun of Lauren for crying over spilled gravy, had called her dramatic and oversensitive. Lauren had locked herself in her room for the rest of the day. I was mean to her that day, Angela said quietly. Carol's whisking slowed. What? I made fun of her for crying. Called her a baby. She was just trying to make everything perfect, and I was horrible to her. You were young, Carol said. Siblings say things they don't mean. But I did mean it. In that moment I meant every word. I thought she was being ridiculous. Paul looked up from the potatoes he was mashing. She forgave you, he said. She always forgave you. Did she? How do you know? Because that's who she was. She didn't hold grudges. Angela wasn't so sure. She remembered other moments now, other times when she'd been careless with Lauren's feelings. The time she'd borrowed Lauren's favorite dress without asking and returned it with a wine stain. The Christmas she'd forgotten to buy Lauren a present until the last minute. The countless phone calls Lauren had made that Angela had ignored because she was busy or hungover or just didn't feel like talking. I wasn't a very good sister, she said. Carol set down her whisk and turned to face Angela. Don't say that. It's true. I was selfish and thoughtless and... Stop it. Carol's voice was sharp. I won't listen to you tear yourself apart like this. Mom. No. You were a good sister. You both were good sisters. You loved each other, even when you fought. Even when you said things you didn't mean. But Angela could see the doubt in her mother's eyes, could hear the uncertainty beneath the fierce words. Carol was trying to convince herself as much as Angela. They finished cooking in relative silence, the kitchen filling with the smells of Thanksgiving. By 6 o'clock, the turkey was golden brown and the side dishes were keeping warm in the oven. Carol set the dining room table with her good china, the pieces that only came out on holidays. 4 place settings, 4 glasses, 4 sets of silverware arranged with military precision. They sat down to dinner as the sun was setting, the dining room lit by candles that Carol had arranged in Lauren's favorite crystal holders. The food looked beautiful, picture perfect, like something from a magazine. Should we say grace? Carol asked. It wasn't something they usually did, but Angela nodded. They joined hands around the table, leaving Lauren's place empty, but somehow still present. Dear Lord, Carol began, her voice shaking slightly. Thank you for bringing our family together today. Thank you for this food and for the hands that prepared it. Thank you for keeping us safe and healthy. And thank you for... She paused, her voice catching. Thank you for the time we had with Lauren. Help us to remember the joy she brought to our lives and help us to feel her presence with us today. Amen. Amen, Angela and Paul echoed. They began to eat, passing dishes and making small talk about the food, but the conversation felt forced, artificial. They were all too aware of the empty chair, of the place setting that wouldn't be touched, of the elephant in the room that none of them wanted to acknowledge. "The turkey is perfect," Paul said. "A little dry," Carol replied, critiquing her own cooking. Lauren would have known to baste it more often. "It's fine, Mom." She had such good instincts about these things. Better than mine, really. I should have let her cook more often while she was... Carol trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air. "While she was alive." Angela set down her fork, the food turning to ash in her mouth. "Mom," she said carefully, "maybe we should talk about her, about Lauren, about what happened." Carol went very still. "What about what happened? About the accident, about how we're all dealing with it, about the fact that we're sitting here pretending everything is normal when it's not." "I don't know what you mean." Paul reached across the table, touched his wife's hand. "Carol, honey, maybe Angela's right. Maybe we need to..." "Need to what?" Carol's voice was rising. "Need to ruin Thanksgiving dinner by talking about horrible things? Need to dwell on tragedy when we should be counting our blessings? We need to be honest with each other." "Honest about what?" Angela felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment, the point of no return. Once she said the words out loud, there would be no taking them back. "About the fact that I was driving that night," she said quietly. The silence that followed was so complete that Angela could hear the candle flames flickering in their holders. Carol stared at her daughter as if she were speaking a foreign language. "What did you say?" "I said I was driving, not Lauren. Me. That's not what happened." "Yes, it is." Angela's voice was getting stronger now, fueled by the relief of finally speaking the truth. "I was drunk, and Lauren came to pick me up, and I insisted on driving home. She tried to stop me, but I wouldn't listen. I got behind the wheel, and I lost control of the car, and I killed her." Carol shook her head frantically. No, that's not right. Lauren was driving. Lauren was always the careful one. She would never have let you... She didn't have a choice." I took the keys away from her. The words seemed to echo in the dining room, bouncing off the walls and settling into the silence like dust. Carol stared at Angela with wide, horrified eyes. "You're lying," she whispered. "I'm not. You're lying because you feel guilty, because you think it's your fault somehow, but it's not your fault. Lauren was driving. The police report says Lauren was driving." Angela looked at her father, who was staring down at his plate. "Dad," she said, "tell her." Paul raised his eyes slowly, and Angela could see the weight of 8 months of secrecy in his gaze. "The paramedics found Angela behind the wheel," he said quietly. Carol's face went white. "What?" "She was driving, Carol. We changed the story to protect her." Carol stood up so abruptly that her chair fell backward, clattering to the floor. "No," she said, backing away from the table. No, that's not true. You're both lying. You're both..." "Mom, please. Don't you dare call me that." Carol's voice was shrill, desperate. "Don't you dare sit there and call me Mom when you just told me you killed my daughter." The words hit Angela like a slap. She felt tears spring to her eyes, but she didn't look away from her mother's face. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "I never meant..." "You never meant for it to happen?" Carol's voice was raw, broken. "You never meant to get behind the wheel of a car when you were too drunk to see straight? You never meant to put my baby's life in danger?" Angela flinched at the fury in her mother's voice, but she forced herself to keep talking. "I was sick, Mom. Alcoholism is a disease." "Don't." Carol held up a hand, her whole body shaking. "Don't you dare make excuses. Don't you dare try to medicalize what you did." "I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to explain..." "There is no explanation," Carol screamed. "There is no explanation for why you took my daughter away from me." The candles on the table flickered in the wake of her words. In the silence that followed, Angela could hear her own heartbeat, loud and fast in her ears. "Carol," Paul said softly, standing up and reaching for his wife. "Don't touch me." Carol backed away from him, her eyes wild. "You knew. You both knew. And you let me... God, you let me set her place at the table. You let me cook her favorite foods. You let me grieve for an innocent victim when the person who killed her was sitting right here." She looked at Angela with such hatred that Angela felt it like a physical blow. "I made her cranberry sauce," Carol whispered. "Her favorite. I was so worried when I couldn't find it yesterday, so worried that she wouldn't have what she liked. But she's not here to eat it, is she? She's never going to eat anything ever again because you killed her." Angela stood up from the table, her legs shaking. "Mom, please, get out." "What?" "Get out of my house. Get out of my sight. I can't look at you." Paul stepped between them. "Carol, she's our daughter. She's a murderer." Carol's voice was flat, emotionless. "She murdered Lauren, and then she let us cover it up. She let us lie to everyone, let us lie to ourselves. Do you know what that makes us? Accessories, accomplices." Angela felt the room spinning around her. This was worse than she'd imagined, worse than her darkest fears about how her mother would react. "I never wanted you to lie for me," she said. "I never asked for that. You never asked us not to either." The truth of that hit home. Angela remembered the days after the accident, the confusion of waking up in the hospital with no clear memory of what had happened. Her parents had been there, along with the police, and they'd told her that Lauren had been driving. Angela had been too broken, too desperate to believe it wasn't her fault, to question their story. "I was hurt," she said weakly. "I had a head injury. I couldn't think straight." "But you could think straight later. You could think straight for 8 months while you let us believe a lie." Carol walked to Lauren's empty chair and placed her hands on the back of it. "I've been talking to her," she said quietly, "every day. I've been apologizing to her for not being able to save her, for not being in the car that night, for not protecting her from the ice on the road." She looked up at Angela with tears streaming down her face. "But I should have been protecting her from you." Angela felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, but something deeper. The last fragile connection to the family she'd once been part of. "I'll go," she said. "Good." "Carol, wait." Paul started. "Let her go, Paul. Let the person who killed our daughter go back to wherever she came from and leave us alone." Angela walked toward the door, moving like someone in a dream. The Thanksgiving dinner sat abandoned on the table, the perfect meal that no one would finish eating. The candles continued to flicker, casting dancing shadows on the walls. As she reached the doorway, she turned back one last time. "I loved her too," she said. Carol didn't respond. She was sitting in Lauren's chair now, her hands flat on the table in front of her, staring at nothing. Angela went upstairs and packed her few belongings into the small suitcase she'd brought. As she moved around her childhood room, she found herself looking for signs of Lauren, traces of the sister who had shared this hallway, this bathroom, this house for so many years. In the hallway, she paused outside Lauren's bedroom door. It was still closed, still locked, but she pressed her ear against the wood and listened. Silence. But not empty silence, the kind of quiet that felt full, expectant, as if someone on the other side was listening back. "I'm sorry," Angela whispered to the door. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry." For a moment she thought she heard something, a soft sigh maybe, or the whisper of movement, but when she pressed her ear closer to the door, there was nothing. She found her father waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, car keys in his hand. "I'll drive you to the airport," he said quietly. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." They drove in silence through the darkening streets. It was Thanksgiving evening, and most of the houses they passed were warm with light, filled with families gathered around dinner tables. Angela tried not to look at them. "She doesn't mean it," Paul said finally, as they pulled into the airport parking garage. "Yes, she does. She's in shock, she's angry, but she doesn't mean it." Angela looked at her father's profile in the dim light of the parking garage. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. Paul was quiet for such a long time that Angela thought he wasn't going to answer. "I don't know," he said finally. "I want to, but I don't know how." The honesty of it was almost worse than her mother's rage. Angela nodded and got out of the car. "Angela," Paul called after her. She turned back. "Take care of yourself," he said, "for Lauren's sake, if not for your own." Angela watched her father drive away, his taillights disappearing into the stream of traffic. Then she walked into the airport terminal, bought a ticket on the next flight to Denver, and sat down to wait. As her plane lifted off 2 hours later, Angela looked down at the lights of her hometown growing smaller below. Somewhere down there, her parents were sitting in their house, surrounded by the wreckage of Thanksgiving dinner and the truth that had finally been spoken. And somewhere down there, Lauren was still waiting for someone to truly acknowledge what had happened to her. Angela flew back to Denver and checked into a cheap motel near the airport. She had nowhere else to go. Her apartment had been sublet while she was in treatment. Her job was gone. Her savings were nearly depleted. She lay on the narrow bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling, listening to planes take off and land outside her window. She'd done what Dr. Patterson had told her to do. She'd gone home, faced her family, told the truth. But instead of feeling liberated, she felt more lost than ever. The truth hadn't set anyone free. It had just destroyed what little remained of their family. For 3 days, she didn't leave the motel room. She ordered Chinese food and watched mindless television and tried not to think about her parents sitting in their empty house, trying to figure out how to exist in the aftermath of her confession. On the 4th day, her phone rang. Her father's name appeared on the screen. "Dad?" "Angela." His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. "I need you to come home. Mom doesn't want me there. Your mother's in the hospital." Angela sat up, her heart pounding. "What happened?" She had a breakdown Tuesday night. I found her in Lauren's room and she wasn't making sense. Talking to someone who wasn't there, arguing with empty air. "Is she okay?" "She's sedated. The doctors say it's a psychotic break brought on by trauma and stress. They want to keep her for observation." Angela felt guilt crash over her like a wave. "This is my fault." "Maybe, but she needs you now. We both do." Angela caught the next flight home. She found her father in the waiting room of the psychiatric ward at Mercy General Hospital, the same hospital where she'd been treated after the accident. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 4 days since she'd left. "How is she?" "Better. The medication is helping. But she keeps asking for you." "For me?" "I thought she never wanted to see me again. She doesn't remember saying that. She doesn't remember much about Thanksgiving dinner at all. The doctor says that's common with this kind of break. The mind protects itself by forgetting the worst parts." They walked down the hallway to Carol's room. Through the window, Angela could see her mother lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. She looked small and fragile, nothing like the fierce woman who had thrown her out of the house 4 days ago. "Mom?" Angela said softly as they entered the room. Carol turned her head and smiled, and for a moment she looked almost like herself again. "Angie, you came back." "Of course I came back." Carol reached out and took Angela's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I was so worried about you," she said. "When you didn't come home for dinner, I was worried something had happened." Angela looked at her father over Carol's head. He shook his head slightly, warning her not to correct the confusion. "I'm here now," Angela said instead. "Good, that's good." Carol closed her eyes, still holding Angela's hand. "Lauren will be so happy to see you. She's been asking about you." Angela felt her throat tighten. "Has she?" "Oh, yes. She misses you when you're away. Says the house is too quiet without both her girls." Angela spent the next hour sitting with her mother, listening to Carol talk about Lauren as if she were still alive, still living at home, still part of their daily routine. It was heartbreaking and surreal, but also strangely comforting. For a little while, she could pretend along with her mother that their family was still intact. When Carol finally fell asleep, Angela and Paul walked to the hospital cafeteria for coffee. "The doctors think it's temporary," Paul said. "The confusion, I mean. They think her memory will come back gradually as the medication stabilizes her mood." "What happens when she remembers?" "I don't know." They sat in silence for a while, watching hospital staff come and go. The cafeteria was nearly empty, just a few tired-looking doctors and a woman who might have been someone's daughter, like Angela, keeping vigil. "I'm sorry," Angela said finally, "for all of this, for coming home and tearing everything apart." "You didn't tear anything apart. It was already broken. We were just pretending it wasn't. But Mom was functioning before. She was coping." Was she? Or was she just slowly losing her mind in a more socially acceptable way? Angela considered this. Her mother's behavior over the past few days, the obsessive cooking, the place settings for four, the conversations with empty air, hadn't started with Angela's confession. It had been building for months. The lie was killing her, Paul continued. Maybe not quickly, but surely. She couldn't grieve properly because she couldn't acknowledge what she was actually grieving for. What do you mean? She was grieving for Lauren the victim, Lauren the innocent. But that's not who died that night. Angela felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Paul stared into his coffee cup. Lauren knew you were drunk, he said quietly. She knew you were in no condition to drive, but she got in that car anyway, because she was trying to help me, or because she was enabling you. The words hit Angela like a slap. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times had she covered for you before? How many times had she made excuses for your drinking, driven you home when you were too drunk to drive yourself, lied to your parents about where you'd been? Angela wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Lauren had been covering for her for years, since college, maybe even before. Whenever Angela got too drunk at family gatherings, Lauren would make her excuses. Whenever Angela missed important events because she was hungover, Lauren would smooth things over with their parents. She was protecting me, Angela said weakly. She was enabling your addiction, and maybe on some level your mother knew that. Maybe that's why she couldn't grieve properly, because she was angry at Lauren too. You think Mom blamed Lauren? I think your mother is a complicated person with complicated feelings about what happened, and I think the lie we told made it impossible for her to work through those feelings in a healthy way. Angela felt sick. She'd come home hoping to find redemption, or at least understanding. Instead, she'd uncovered layers of guilt and complicity that went deeper than she'd ever imagined. What do we do now? She asked. We tell the truth, all of it, to the doctors, to your mother when she's ready to hear it, to ourselves. And then what? Then we figure out how to live with it. They spent the evening in Carol's room, taking turns reading to her from magazines and watching mindless television. Carol slept fitfully, occasionally calling out Lauren's name or asking questions that made no sense. Each time she woke up, she seemed surprised to see them there, as if she'd forgotten they were coming. Around midnight, Paul went home to get some rest, leaving Angela alone with her mother. The psychiatric ward was quiet at night, just the soft sounds of nurses making their rounds and the occasional cry from another patient's room. Angela was dozing in the uncomfortable visitor's chair when she heard her mother's voice. She's here, Carol whispered. Angela opened her eyes. Carol was sitting up in bed, looking toward the corner of the room. Mom, what's wrong? She's here. Can't you see her? Angela looked toward the corner, but saw only shadows and medical equipment. Who's here, Mom? Lauren. She's standing right there. Carol's voice was calm, matter of fact. She looked sad. Angela felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She looked again at the corner where her mother was staring, and for just a moment she thought she saw something, a shift in the shadows, a sense of presence. What is she doing? Angela asked quietly. Just standing there, watching us. Carol held out her hand toward the corner. Come here, sweetheart. Don't be afraid. The room seemed to grow colder. Angela pulled her jacket closer around her shoulders. Mom, there's no one there. Of course there is. She's been coming to see me every night since I've been here. She wants to tell me something, but she can't seem to find the words. Carol was still reaching toward the empty corner, her eyes focused on something Angela couldn't see. What do you think she wants to tell you? That she forgives me. Carol's voice was barely above a whisper. That she knows I did the best I could. Forgives you for what? Carol finally looked at Angela, and her eyes were clearer than they'd been since Angela arrived. For not saving her, she said. For not being strong enough to stop what happened. Angela felt tears prick her eyes. Mom, you couldn't have saved her. You weren't even there. But I should have been. I should have known she was in danger. I should have done something. Angela reached over and took her mother's hand. The only person who could have saved her was me, she said. And I didn't. That's not your fault. Carol squeezed her daughter's hand. She says you're wrong, she said, still looking toward the corner. She says it wasn't anyone's fault. She says accidents happen and blame doesn't change anything. Angela looked toward the corner again. This time she was sure she felt something, a presence warm and familiar and heartbreakingly sad. "Tell her I'm sorry," Angela whispered. "She knows," Carol said. "She's always known." They sat in silence for a long time, mother and daughter keeping vigil together in the quiet hospital room. Eventually, Carol's eyes grew heavy and she lay back down, her hand still holding Angela's. "She's gone now," Carol murmured as she drifted off to sleep. "But she'll be back. She always comes back." Angela stayed in the chair all night, watching her mother sleep and thinking about what Carol had said. When morning came, she wasn't sure if she believed her mother had actually seen Lauren or if it had been another manifestation of her breakdown. But she found herself hoping it was real, hoping that Lauren was somewhere nearby watching over them, waiting for them to find a way to forgive themselves and each other, because if Lauren could forgive them, maybe someday they could learn to forgive themselves. Carol came home from the hospital a week later, quieter but more present than she'd been since Lauren's death. The medication had stabilized her mood, and the therapy sessions had given her tools for dealing with her grief. But most importantly, she remembered everything, including Angela's confession on Thanksgiving night. They didn't talk about it at first. Carol focused on getting back into a routine, and Angela helped her father manage the household tasks that Carol had been neglecting. They moved around each other carefully, like people walking through a minefield. But on the second night after Carol's return, she knocked on the door of Angela's childhood bedroom. "Can we talk?" she asked. They went downstairs to the kitchen and made tea, the ritual giving them both something to do with their hands. When they finally sat down across from each other at the small table by the window, Carol looked directly into Angela's eyes. "I remember what you told me," she said, "about the accident, about you driving." Angela nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "I also remember what I said to you. How I reacted." Carol's voice was steady, but Angela could see the effort it was taking. "I was cruel. I was angry and hurt, and I wanted to hurt you back. You had every right to be angry, maybe. But I didn't have the right to throw you out of this family." Angela felt tears start to well up in her eyes. "I killed her, Mom. I was drunk, and I got behind the wheel, and I killed your daughter." "You killed my daughter," Carol agreed, "but you're also my daughter. And Lauren would never forgive me if I abandoned you when you needed help the most." They cried together then, across the small kitchen table where they'd shared countless meals and conversations over the years. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. That would take time, maybe years. But it was a beginning. "I want to see where it happened," Carol said when their tears had subsided. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. I need to see it, to make it real in my mind." Paul wasn't happy about the idea, but he understood. The next afternoon, the three of them drove out to Route 15, to the stretch of road where the accident had occurred. The tree was gone, cut down months ago by the county road crew, but the spot was still visible, a gap in the tree line marked by churned earth and scattered debris. Someone had left flowers there, wilted and brown from the winter weather. They stood by the side of the road in the cold December air, looking at the place where Lauren had died. Cars passed by occasionally, their drivers probably unaware that they were driving by a place where a family had been destroyed. "It's smaller than I imagined," Carol said quietly. "What is?" "The space between the road and the trees. It seems like such a short distance. I always pictured it as being farther." Angela looked at the gap between the asphalt and the tree line. Her mother was right. It was maybe 30 feet, if that. Such a small distance to contain such enormous consequences. "She would have been scared," Carol said. Angela closed her eyes, remembering what she could of those final moments. Lauren's voice tight with fear. "Angie, slow down. Please slow down." The feeling of the wheel spinning in her hands. The sound of Lauren screaming her name. "I think it happened too fast for her to be scared for long," Angela said. Carol nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I want to leave something," she said. She'd brought a small bouquet of white roses, Lauren's favorite flower. She placed them carefully among the other memorial items, arranging them with the same precision she brought to setting the dinner table. "I love you, sweetheart," she said to the flowers, to the spot where her daughter had died. "I miss you every day." Paul put his arm around his wife's shoulders, and Angela stood slightly apart, feeling like an intruder on their grief. But Carol reached out and pulled her closer, and for a moment they stood together as a family at the place where their family had been broken. That night, Carol made dinner for 3 people. No extra place setting, no 4th chair pulled out from the table. Just 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses. It was the first normal meal they'd shared since Angela had come home. "I've been thinking," Carol said as they ate, "about what comes next, for all of us." "What do you mean?" Angela asked. "I mean, we can't keep living in the past. We can't keep this house as a shrine to Lauren. We can't keep pretending she might come home." Paul looked up from his plate. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we clean out her room, give her clothes to charity, keep a few special things, but let the rest go." Angela felt her stomach clench. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I know I can't heal while I'm surrounded by reminders of what I've lost." They spent the next day going through Lauren's belongings. It was harder than Angela had expected. Each item seemed to carry memories, pieces of her sister's life that would be gone forever once they were packed away. Lauren's clothes still smelled like her perfume. Her books were marked with her careful annotations. Her jewelry box played the same melody it had played since she was 12 years old. "She loved this necklace," Carol said, holding up a delicate silver chain with a small cross pendant. "Your grandmother gave it to her for her confirmation." "You should keep it," Angela said. "No." Carol pressed the necklace into Angela's hand. "She would have wanted you to have it." Angela started to protest, but Carol shook her head. "She would have wanted you to have something of hers, something to remember the good times." Angela fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of it against her skin. It felt strange to wear something of Lauren's, but also somehow comforting. They worked in silence for most of the day, sorting Lauren's possessions into boxes marked keep, donate, and throw away. By evening, the room was nearly empty, just the furniture and a few carefully chosen mementos remaining. "It looks so different," Carol said, standing in the doorway. The room did look different, bigger somehow, and sadder. Without Lauren's personality filling every corner, it was just a bedroom, ordinary and unremarkable. "We can leave it like this," Paul said. "As a guest room." Carol shook her head. "No, I want to change it completely. New paint, new furniture. Make it into something else." "What?" "I don't know yet. A craft room, maybe, or a library. Something that's about the future, not the past." That night, Angela lay in her own childhood bed and thought about what her mother had said, about focusing on the future instead of the past. It sounded like good advice, but Angela wasn't sure how to follow it. Her future felt as uncertain as it had when she left rehab. She was still awake when she heard it, soft footsteps in the hallway outside her room. She held her breath and listened, but the footsteps didn't pause at her door. They continued down the hall, stopping at what used to be Lauren's room. Angela got up and crept to her door, opening it just a crack. The hallway was dark, but she could see a faint light coming from under Lauren's door. As she watched, the light flickered and went out. She waited for several minutes, but there were no more sounds, no more signs of movement. Finally, she crept back to bed, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. But in the morning, when she passed Lauren's room, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The door was standing slightly open. Carol insisted she had closed it the night before. Paul swore he hadn't been near it, and Angela knew she hadn't touched it. But there it was, open just wide enough for someone to slip through. They stood in the hallway, the 3 of them, staring at the partially open door. "Maybe the house is settling," Paul said. "Old hinges, you know." But none of them believed it. They all knew what they were looking at, one final sign that Lauren wasn't quite ready to let go. Carol walked to the door and pushed it fully open. The room was exactly as they'd left it, empty, clean, waiting to become something new. "It's time," Carol said quietly. She closed the door firmly and turned the lock with a decisive click. "Goodbye, sweetheart," she whispered to the closed door. "Rest now." Angela felt something shift in the air around them, a sense of release or resignation. Whether it was Lauren finally letting go, or their family finally learning to live with their loss, she couldn't say. But for the first time since coming home, the house felt quiet in a peaceful way rather than an ominous one. That afternoon, Carol called a painting contractor to get estimates for redecorating Lauren's room. Paul started researching grief counselors who might help them navigate their new reality as a family of 3, and Angela began looking into apartment listings in town, thinking it might be time to start building her own life instead of hiding from it. They were learning, slowly and painfully, how to exist in the world without Lauren, how to be a family that had been broken and was trying to heal. It wasn't the same as forgiveness, and it wasn't the same as forgetting, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, Angela signed the lease on a small apartment across town and moved out of her childhood home on a gray Saturday in March. Her parents helped her carry boxes and offered to buy her furniture for the empty rooms, but she declined. She wanted to fill the space slowly, deliberately, with things that belonged to her new life rather than her old one. She'd found a job at a nonprofit organization that helped other people in recovery find housing and employment. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt meaningful. She was helping people who were trying to rebuild their lives, just as she was trying to rebuild hers. Carol had turned Lauren's room into a craft room, with bright yellow walls and shelves full of yarn and fabric and art supplies. She'd started teaching quilting classes at the community center, finding purpose in helping other women create something beautiful with their hands. Paul had returned to his routine of work and crossword puzzles and evening walks around the neighborhood. He seemed lighter somehow, as if the weight of the secret he'd carried for so long had been lifted from his shoulders. They had dinner together every Sunday, the 3 of them around the kitchen table that was now permanently set for 3. They talked about work and current events and plans for the future. Sometimes they talked about Lauren, sharing memories that made them laugh instead of cry. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but it had changed shape. Instead of the sharp cutting pain of fresh loss, it had settled into something deeper and more manageable, a sadness that was part of them now, woven into the fabric of who they were as individuals and as a family. Angela still went to AA meetings twice a week. She'd found a sponsor, a woman named Claire who had lost her own sister in a drunk driving accident 20 years earlier. Claire understood the particular hell of living with that kind of guilt, and she helped Angela navigate the complex process of making amends, not just to other people, but to herself. The hardest person to forgive, Claire told her, is always yourself. Angela was still working on that part. On the anniversary of Lauren's death, they drove out to Route 15 together. The county had planted new trees along the roadside, small saplings that would take years to grow tall enough to provide real shade. The memorial flowers were gone, cleared away by road maintenance crews, but Carol brought fresh white roses and placed them carefully at the base of one of the new trees. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she whispered. Lauren would have turned 31 that day. They stood in silence for a few minutes, watching cars pass by on the road where their family had been torn apart. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and the world continued to turn as it always had, indifferent to their small human tragedy. But they were still here, still standing, still breathing, still trying to figure out how to live with what had happened. It wasn't the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they had, and maybe that was enough. As they drove home, Angela looked in the rearview mirror at the spot where Lauren had died. The new trees were barely visible now, lost among the other trees and signs and ordinary landmarks of a suburban highway. In a few years, no one would be able to tell that anything significant had ever happened there. The road would look the same as any other stretch of asphalt. The trees would grow tall and blend in with the forest. The story of what happened would fade from public memory, becoming just another accident statistic in some forgotten police file. But Angela would always know. Every time she drove past that spot, she would remember her sister's voice calling her name, remember the feeling of losing control, remember the moment when everything changed forever. And maybe that was how it should be. Maybe some things weren't meant to be forgotten, even when, especially when, remembering hurt. The living had to carry the dead with them after all. It was the least they could do, and the most. Lauren would always have a place at their table, even when her chair remained empty. She would always be part of their family, even though she could never come home. They would set the table for 3 now, but they would always remember 4. And in the quiet moments, in the spaces between words, in the breath before someone spoke her name, Lauren would be there, not as a ghost or a haunting, but as love that refused to die even when death seemed to have won. That was what remained. That was what endured. Love and the courage to keep living despite its inevitable loss.